Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee. We've just hot-footed it from the George Rennie Awards, which went very well. We've managed to mop up 3 years' worth in one. So thank you, Mayor, for that. All good, and I think some happy recipients. So thank you all. In terms of the meeting today, we have apologies, quite a number, from Councillors Carr and Bonser, David Ling, Ian Goodwin, Chris Wardle and Max Craven. I think that's it. Thank you. In terms of late items, I'm not aware of any late items, but we have had to defer Cosy Club and the Dolphin applications, so they're on the agenda to be discussed, but they're not going to be discussed because, as I understand it, the listed building applications haven't come in yet, so they need to be picked up at the same time, really. So that will be deferred for consideration next time, or those will. Declarations of interest. Do we have any of those? I myself have to declare an interest in the city centre vision, the ambition document. So what I propose, Paul, Vice Chair, is that's the last item on the agenda. So I'm going to suggest that I leave at that point, and if you would be kind enough to close the meeting.
No problem, Chair.
After that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that takes us to the minutes of the last meeting on the 9th of June. I take it you've all had the chance to review those, and if we could have a proposer. Paul, thank you, and a seconder. Just to confirm, they're a true record. Thank you, Councillor Wood. Okay. Items determined since the last meeting, you've seen that list of one. The Beckett Wells scheme with all the commentary attached to that. So hopefully that's clear. And you also have a list of applications not being considered. So unless there are any comments in relation to those, we'll move on to those that are being considered. We'll take them in the order that they are presented on this agenda. But as I say, the Old Dolphin and Cosy Club will not be discussed. So, Chloe, if I can ask you to introduce the Dog and Moon, please. Thank you.
Right, Dog and Moon on Sadlergate, Grade 2 listed building within the city centre conservation area. You'll have looked at the application online. There's a limited heritage statement and heritage impact assessment. The proposals are as follows. To the front elevation, there's a proposed new awning, 3 floodlights, but no details of those as yet. A new gobbo light, which is a projection light, new lantern, 3 new up and down lighters. The signage is being submitted under a separate application, so doesn't fall under this one. Internally, the proposals are to install new fixed seating at the front of the ground floor, and there's some photographs later on of those. A new opening within the modern brick bar. A new food hoist between the ground and first floor. There's no information on the floor structure, and unfortunately they were unable to accommodate a visit before this meeting. So here's a picture of the seats and the bar and the brickwork, which is proposed to be partially removed to allow access to the bar. Here's the location of the food hoist, which you will have seen online, and the photograph showing the location of where it's proposed, as well as the photograph of the first floor, within the first floor kitchen. To the rear of the building, 1 timber covered structure is being replaced, 1 is being retained, and there's a new bar and a new food hut, which are both timber structures. And that's it. That's the summary.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. So just to summarise, I mean, the main changes externally to the front elevation are the proposed awning and floodlights and wall lights, floodlights being at the high level. I'm not sure we have particular details on any of these, but that's the changes externally. Internally, fairly modest changes, I think, but clearly the most significant is the hoist, proposed hoist to get from kitchen, well, to take kitchen from first floor down to ground floor and back again, essentially. I think hitherto they've been using the stairs. So that's the proposal. And then externally, quite a bit going on in the rear yard, but it's essentially a bunch of timber sheds, temporary structures, I suppose, to enable that to kind of come to life with use and activity. So that's the summary. So comments, please. Chris, thank you.
Yes, well, there's quite a lot of aspects to the proposal. First of all, the heritage statement is very poor, so that didn't provide us with the required information. In terms of the outside, I can't remember being in that rear yard area, and you can't at the moment anyway, but I'm not sure how visible any of it is from outside the site. Looks as though it's partly visible from some other buildings, but it's a bit of a ramshackle collection of very poor buildings, if we can call them buildings, but there's two sheds, one for food and one for drink, and I'm not sure why they need quite so much area covered with polycarbonate sheeting, but they seem to want to cover a big area, you know. So, and I was just before finally on the outside bit, at the awning, I'm very concerned about at the front of the building. I can't see that it's necessary at all, and in my view is a very negative feature in terms of the conservation area, the character of the conservation area. So so I'd like to see that awning not included in the proposal, really, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just asking in terms of visibility, are you able to shed any light on that?
Yeah.
Chloe?
Obviously, as you can see, there's quite a high wall to the rear. Looking at the photograph at the top and looking at the plan, obviously there's quite an area. So in terms of the visibility into this area, it's relatively limited from the lane at the back. But obviously you would be able to see through the gates at some point if they were open, and obviously the gates if they were put in situ where the G is, just adjacent to the G. So there will be glimpses of the structures from that rear route to the top of the plan.
And visible from high level surrounding buildings, I guess, looking onto it. All right. I think they are proposing to have some seating outside at the front, but I guess there's a direct conflict between. I mean, I'm troubled by that and also the floodlights. Floodlight seems the wrong thing on a building such as this, and I guess the awning would block out any light that you're shining from above anyway, so it seems unnecessary to me.
Chair, I think the principle of this pub, which is currently sealed up and redundant, being reopened is an important consideration. I think the proposals out at the rear, whilst being very weak, are not going to have too much of an impact on the conservation area or listed building. I would like to see an improvement in the quality of design of those structures, but as I say, I'm not overly concerned. What I am concerned about is the frontage and the awning, as you've expressed, and the floodlighting, both of which I think will have a detrimental effect on Sadlergate as a whole. And I appreciate what you say, Robin, about the being viewed at 2 o'clock in the morning. I think there will be sufficient low-level lighting with the lamp that's over the double-door entrance. If you've got lighting above the awning, it becomes superfluous.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, one more point. The position of the hoist, do we establish that there is a lime ash floor in there? I'm not concerned about it, but I just think we need a little bit more structural detail. In fact, we need more detail on the whole scheme as a whole, but particularly in that respect where some historic fabric might be taken away. I accept that at the moment the kitchens are upstairs and they have to bring food down the stairs to the servery, so the hoist will be a great benefit for the logistics of the pub. But I'd just like to make sure that there's nothing in that area that's going to be taken away that's too important.
We've asked for that information, but unfortunately it wasn't forthcoming at this time. And as I mentioned, they weren't able to accommodate me to have access to have a look. So yes, we're still awaiting that information.
Okay, Carol?
Yeah, I think the spotlights and the awning, so general observation, spotlights and the awning really are not appropriate, I think, for the streetscape of Sadlergate. I know further down little cafes have modest tables and chairs cordoned off with, like, just cordoned off.
Mm-hmm.
That is acceptable, but one gets the impression that they're going to sort of have a bigger affair at the front, which to me is not appropriate for that very narrow road, Sadlergate. And again, the external lighting, the floodlight, I don't see as enhancing the area at all. And lastly, I think, is the hoist, which is more worrying really for a grade 2 listed building, similar to the building further down. I don't know whether it's number 35, Chloe, where they punched a hole through, without permission, punched the hole through. Which number? Wonky Table. But then went bankrupt, but they never restored the hole in the floor, but that was lime ash. So I would be very worried about the flooring. So yeah, we're to await the information on that. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, is it fair to say that we need to see more detail on those aspects?
I think that's very much so. And as Chris said, the statement was weak.
It doesn't tell you very much,
No,
the heritage statement. No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, we could appreciate the reasons why they want to do things, But we need some more justification for
Yeah,
it.
they need to demonstrate more understanding of the
Yeah.
significance of the building and cover that with their justification. So yes, more information on that. Is that clear, Lindsay? Thank you. It's subject to further review when we see some more detailed information on a proper heritage statement. That takes us on to the former head teacher's cottage. Arthur Street. Chloe, thank you.
Okay, this is the headmaster's house, which is curtilage listed to Grade 1 St Helens House and is also within the Struts Park Conservation Area. So obviously this was a former school in terms of the St Helens House and Pearson Building site, and the headmaster's house is located upon it. There's a number of alterations and repairs that you will see that form part of this application that have already been approved in the 2020 application. So due to the new change of use and proposal for a deli cafe to the ground floor and one first floor apartment, a new planning application was needed. And obviously because there are some alterations which are different to the previous scheme, a new listed building application was required. So on the plans it showed items that were already approved and the new items. So within the next few slides I'm just going to show you the new items, so we're not going over those which have already got permission. So to the rear elevation, we've got, there used to be 2 new windows proposed in this area. They no longer wish to implement those 2 windows. They're proposing, instead of blocking up, to retain a door that is there at the moment, existing door. To the front elevation, they wish to convert, there's a window, and convert it to a door, and the archway is still there on the front, and that's providing the access into the delicatessen and cafe. To the boundary wall, they're proposing an opening to the wall in front of this new doorway. So you can see it runs at the side of the building, the projection coming forward there, and that's the width of the opening. So there's a couple of photographs just showing you where the proposed door is and the frontage and the wall. In terms of the ground floor plan, which is the top plan, there's 1 additional wall proposed to be removed in the new delicatessen. So that's that one. And there's there's a little bit of blocking up to provide the unisex WC. To the first floor, there's more of a wall that was going to be removed is now being retained, so more of it is being retained. So that's a summary of the changes and the things which are new in terms of this application.
Okay, thank you very much. So within the curtilage of St Helens House, the headmaster's house, essentially change of use to create a deli cafe on the ground floor with a single apartment on the first floor. The principal changes, unfortunately I haven't differentiated between those things that have been previously consented and those things that they're now seeking permission for. So it's quite tricky to read through and fully understand this, but essentially the removal of an additional wall on the ground floor, the removal of section of boundary wall on the principal elevation, and then the insertion of a new door to give access to the cafe. and then the apartment is configured as shown above. So comments, please. Chris, do you want to go first again?
Do you? Yes, I mean, obviously, in terms of the cluster of buildings, this is of lesser significance than the main building, and but it is in its own right an attractive arts and crafts building of some value. Like you, Chair, I'd found it difficult to see what we were actually being asked to consider now, and I think I'm right in saying that we did consider previously the removal of the lean-to walkway, which was a historic connection in terms of the use and linking the village. But it sounds from what's just been said that is already consented, and so the items that Chloe's highlighted are by comparison of lesser significance, I think, to the the staircase and so on that we've previously considered. As far as that I mean, it seems a shame to break through that wall to me to form the new doorway, but I can see there is some advantage in doing so, and the arch that exists lends itself to being a new doorway. The wall changes seemed relatively insignificant to me, unless Chloe can sort of say, well, that's going to disrupt the character of the layout of the building. There seems to have been previously a passageway through there, and then that's now going to be part of that room, which I can't read what it actually says. I can't remember what the description of the right-hand room is there. That what seemed to be a separate passageway will now be all part of a bigger space. Having said that, I suppose that is the tendency nowadays to prefer open
it up,
isn't it?
Yeah,
rather than subdivision. And if that helps its use, then maybe it's not too bad. So I think overall I'm feeling it's probably better to get this building back into use. It's a secondary building in the cluster, and I probably would suggest that I've no objection.
Okay, thank you for that. Paul.
Yes, Chair. I think, like Chris, it would be nice to get this building back into some sort of use. I have no real issues with the opening up of those two rooms into one space, because as long as we can keep the essence of the division, i.e. by the nibs either side of the doorway and perhaps a downstand of a beam, so the expression of the spaces still remains intact. With regard to the formation of the doorway and the removal of a section of the boundary wall, no great issues on that, apart from that boundary wall is actually bonded in to the gable of the main wall, so it would be beneficial if the detail was amended such that you were actually altering the wall and not the building. So to leave a pier at that only needs to be a brick and a half, but to leave a pier there would be a better detail and leave the fabric of the main building intact. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay. That's a no objection then from the committee. I think we welcome the building coming back into use. I think the only significant comment is relating to that section of wall. So accepting the removal of a section of wall to enable the new entrance to happen, but a strong plea that pier, a small section of wall is left, so there's a short section of, a short pier, rather than cutting into the gable end, which would require toothing in new bricks and so on. So it would seem sensible to just move that opening slightly away from the gable edge to enable that pier to be left behind to form an opening in the wall and not interfere with the fabric of the building proper. So I think that is no objection on that basis. Thank you, Lindsay. Chloe, that takes us on to 1 Abbey Yard.
Okay, this is 1 Abbey Yard, Grade 2 listed building in Darley Abbey Conservation Area and also within the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site. There's a very thorough heritage statement for this residential house. To the main house and the front the front elevation that we're seeing there's no change. To the rear, there's 2 roof lights, heritage roof lights, and to the side elevation, there's a new door to the basement. And 2 new windows, one to the ground floor and one to the basement and one to the ground floor. So inside the basement, just pointing out the main things, obviously alterations are very limited apart from the installation of the new door and window, and they're to match existing. To the ground floor, where most of the changes to this particular property is concentrated, there's the removal of 2 walls, one that divides the kitchen and the dining room, and the other between the WC and stall. There's also, one opening that's been blocked up, that's to WC. There's also a log burner being proposed into the chimney breast, and you'll all have seen the chimney in the photographs online. And the proposal is to expose some of the brickwork around those, both sides. So that's a summary, and you will have seen the photographs that are online regarding the views of the wall being proposed to be removed. And those are they. And then first floor, very limited changes, mainly for, the 2 roof lights, but the property they are looking at using breathable paint and lime plaster repair. To the outside, the proposal is to demolish the existing garage and construct a new traditional red brick one, as well as construct a new drive with a parking space. So there's the existing plan top left and proposal bottom right. So enlarging the size of the existing garage by demolishing it, and enlarging the opening. There's a pedestrian gate proposed adjacent to it, and then along the same existing wall alignment, rebuilding of a garage. So it follows the existing wall. So there's the existing, which you will have seen online, and the proposed, and the new proposed garage. To one side, there's double timber gates and single pedestrian timber gate, and a roller garage door on the other side. And that's it.
Did you have a photograph again of the garage as existing?
There's that one at an oblique angle,
Yeah.
top right. Is
Thank
that
you.
sufficient? And then that's the bottom left is the area of wall which the location of the proposed new garage.
Yeah. Thank you, Chloe. So they're kind of opposing. So there's a roller shutter door on the other side of the other garage. That's right, isn't it? on that. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Okay, so grade 2 listed property, a very comprehensive heritage statement, which is extremely helpful. In terms of external changes, roof lights, as have been described, and then a couple of windows on the side elevation. Very little change internally, a little bit of change on the ground floor with the removal of sections of wall. Not really any change on the first floor, notwithstanding the roof lights. I suppose the more significant changes relating to the garage building, which you can see on that photograph with its brick detailing over the entrance. So that would go, and the new garage would be built. So comments, please. Chris, you're first in again.
Yep, okay. Yeah, I think the significant alterations to this building have been done in the past, really, and done well. So, yes, I'd agree with you, Chair, about the comprehensive nature of the heritage impact assessment by contrast to previous application we mentioned that on. And that does explain why the proposals are being put forward, which it should do, and I was quite happy with that. It will improve the use, and there is no significant loss of fabric or harm to the building. As far as the garage is concerned, it seemed, from memory, the slates were going to match the main building, which would be fine, and the brick will match the wall against which it will be seen. So those two aspects seem to be completely satisfactory, really. So I couldn't think that I had any objection at all to the proposal.
Okay, thank you for that. Paul?
Chair, yeah, I have no objection to the alterations to the interior of the building or the formation of new openings. I do feel that there's something not quite right about this garage arrangement and the loss of the scallop pediment over the top of the existing garage door. It's something that just doesn't seem to... That's quite
Thanks,
characteristic
Chloe.
of that area, and to the forecourt. I'm not sure, without sitting down and design it myself, how you get over that, but I think a slightly more sensitive approach to it which retains at least the character of that raised section, would be better.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the drawing, it feels like that could have been retained with a widening of that opening, although perhaps it's not quite
I think
symmetrical.
So, and that would be quite the way to do it. Yeah.
I mean, that would avoid the loss of that, wouldn't it? Any further comments? Carol, were you going to say something?
I think I do agree with Paul that the scallop top to the garage is much preferable to the little triangular thing that they want to put on, and I think that, as it stands, adds to the nature of the whole environment. It just fits in better than a triangular roof. So I would agree. But the rest, the internal alterations are fine. Are the windows going to be wood, the same material? Yeah, so I've no objection to that, but the garage would be lovely to see the original kept and maybe widened if that's what they wanted, to have a bigger car there.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I think it's probably just worth making note that the existing windows that are in there are stormproof type windows. I would hope that the new windows will be flush casements.
Okay, with that comment in mind, I think we're content with the changes to the proposed for the house, but there's been some discussion about the garage. The question is, how strongly do we feel about that? Is that an objection on the basis that they reconsider and retain that detail over the existing doors, or are we going to advise?
I personally think that it's something that the officer ought to be able to deal with a taking in view our comments. So technically it's a no objection, subject to refinement of that detail.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So on that basis, thank you, Paul. No objection. But we'll urge you, Chloe, to have some detailed discussions with them specifically about the garage, and also about the flush casement windows. That concludes on that one. Thank you very much, Lindsay. As I mentioned, we're not discussing the Old Dolphin or Cosy Club, so that takes us on to 4 Vernon Street. Chloe, please.
Right. This is 4 Vernon Street, circa 1840, Grade 2 listed building within Frygate Conservation Area, one of the Regency villas. These applications are for the change of use from offices to 7 flats. So these are, and obviously associated internal alterations in association with that change. There's removal of internal walls, a number of those, staircase, blocking up of doorways, creation of new openings and new partition walls. There's no detailed heritage statement or heritage impact assessment. There isn't a narrative on the evolution of the building or interpretation of the layout or the construction of walls, etc. In terms of other information, fire partitioning, sound insulation, drainage runs, vents, flues, that sort of thing, that hasn't been submitted either. So there's the existing plans that you would have seen online, the proposal plan, which shows the amount of alteration to install these 7 flats within this building, and the demolition plan, which really does show just how many walls and the staircase which is proposed to be removed. I was able to visit this property, and I've taken some photographs just to show. This is a photograph of the front room and the dividing wall between the 2 spaces where the whole wall was proposed to be removed. And you can see the cornicing, etc. There's also cupboards within arched openings where the wall on the plan showed removal of the wall to the right, the whole wall. And once again, upstairs on the first floor, there's sort of a recessed joinery cupboard on a wall that's proposed to be removed. This is a photograph of the stairs, the staircase, which is proposed to be removed between ground and first floor. And then there's some proposed changes on the top floor to the staircase also. So that gives you a bit of a flavour of the extent of change and the proposals that are part of this scheme.
Thank you, Chloe, for that. So Grade 2 listed property on Vernon Street. It's, I think, just to reiterate, the heritage statement is barely says anything about the building. It certainly doesn't provide a narrative or a justification for the changes, and doesn't really tell you anything about the asset in the first place. So that needs to be addressed before this can be considered properly. The project is about change of use from offices to 7 flats. It's involving considerable change internally, including wholesale removal of walls, including cornicing, recess cupboards, etc. Removal of historic stair, etc. So quite a bit of change. And before I invite comments, Max Craven has kindly provided some of his own. He can't be here, as you know, but he says that this property has one of the least altered interiors in the street, and he's very concerned about the proposed changes, not least because the subdivision into small flats and HMOs in a street of this quality, he says, should be opposed in principle, and he cites the recent conversion of examples such as 40 St Mary's Gate, which is a single dwelling. It's effectively converted back to become a very handsome single dwelling. So there's precedent for this kind of thing, and he, I think, rightly says this would be a much better option for this building. He's also helpfully provided quite a lot of useful background information about the building in question and the previous occupants. So there's a lot of knowledge and understanding out there, but none of it's in the application submitted thus far, unfortunately, in terms of the heritage statement. So I think with that bit of context, if I could invite comments from the floor, please. Paul, thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you. It is a poorly conceived scheme. I have to say the comments that Max has made through you about preserving these as individual units is the most preferable, but there is too much loss of historic fabric in the proposals. There is no justification whatsoever within the scheme, and I think we need to object to this both on principle and lack of detail.
Thank you. Carol?
Just one sentence. I think the whole scheme appears totally unacceptable for this unspoilt 1830s building. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin?
I don't object to residential use of Vernon Street. I think the principle of converting back to the original use is a good one. But somebody's been quite simply greedy. Was this Montague's offices before, or were they next door?
Next.
You're right, okay, yeah.
Either end of Vernon Street, Montague's as in Derek Montague.
Yes.
This is actually the home of Greenhatch surveyors originally.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember. Yes. Yeah, that's what I do remember, yes. Yeah, go back and come back with something better, and a figure smaller than 7, certainly. I would suggest something smaller than 4. But,
Okay, thank you. Carol, come back.
Just one other comment, that the idea that you're going to start the precedent of having houses of multiple occupancy in this street, I think, is unacceptable. I think it's not the street, because once you've got this, it will set a precedent like Hartington Street, and it's very worrying. And I do like the idea of people living in these houses, but not this area for houses of multiple occupancy. Thank you.
technically, this isn't an HMO, is it? It's 7 flats. I think we've got to be careful when we say buildings in multiple occupancy. There are specific rules about that.
Yeah.
Whereas this is 7 flats.
Yeah, it's not strictly.
I think 7 flats is at least 3 too many.
Yeah, no apologies if I misled you. It's not a HMO, but it's 7 flats, as you rightly say. Yeah. Christy, do you want to add anything to that?
Really, I'm in agreement with the comments that have been made by my fellow committee members, so it should be less.
Okay, so thank you all for that. I mean, I think that's an objection in strong terms on the basis that there needs to be a proper justification for any change through a well-considered and fully researched heritage statement. There is a strong sense here that multiple flats is the wrong thing for this street, and concern about the precedent that might set. So I think the degree of change and the extent of loss of historic fabric makes this unacceptable in its current form. So an objection on that basis. Thank you. That concludes the items for consideration. At this point, if I can hand over to the Vice Chair, Paul, to take you through the city centre vision. I'll have to leave the room because a colleague of mine was involved in my practice. So thank you very much, and see you next time. Oh, yes. In fact, I think I'm not there for that.